Hey everyone, we are back with Tempestagi Talk, a podcast where we talk about the Seattle Storm. I know it's been a minute, but listen, a lot is going down in the WNBA. A lot has gone down on social media, making some references to the Seattle Storm. And of course, we know that Nneka Ogwumike and the rest of the leadership in the WNBA Players Association have decided to opt out of the current collective bargaining agreement. And so we're going to talk about a lot of those topics, not just for today, but for the off season. If you're joining us for the first time at Black Rosie Media in the WNBA off season, what we'll do is we'll have our show Tempestagi Talk every other week. We also, though, have Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans that will be running every other week. So either way, we will have women's basketball talk on Black Rosie Media every single week for y'all, and we're excited. But I want to get into a few things here because again, there's a lot happening right now. It is going to be a busy off season. If we thought last off season was busy, this off season is going to be even busier. And I want to break down a few of the things that are happening. But first, let me know in the chat if you are watching live on YouTube. Where are y'all watching from? I am dressed up if I had to pick as just, me. Why not? I'm dressed up as me. But I got to see a lot of costumes, Halloween costumes. Of course, we've seen a lot of WNBA players. Steph Dolson always goes really aggressive when it comes to, dressing up. So what kind of festivities have y'all gotten into for spooky season? We know that a lot of WNBA players like to get into that. But here are a few things that I wanted to talk about. And Roberta Rodriguez is set to join us. So once she does, we'll bring her into the chat. But I mean, congratulations to the New York Liberty. Of course, I'm a wee bit biased because I am the host of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. And listen, the New York Liberty had to gut out, or as Jonquel Jones sometimes says, thug out that win. Speaking of JJ, congratulations on not just your first championship, but then messes around and becomes finals MVP. Jonquel Jones has been on cloud nine since October 20th, having a great time. And I love that for her, truly do. So congratulations. If y'all want to learn or hear more about what I thought about, the foul calls, the 50-11 jump balls that Nafisa Collier got. Listen, I've talked about that on Gotta Get Up, but also, like I said, every other week we'll have a show here on Black Rosie Media. So you can definitely check out Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Here's what our logo looks like. And yes, we did the subway tile before the championship run. So that was pretty dope to see that then the team used the subway tile, iconic, not only subway tile, but they also used the mosaic, which is pretty cool, with some of their graphics for the championship. So congratulations to the New York Liberty. But yes, I know a lot of people think it was controversial. I'm just saying, I never committed to that it wasn't a foul. And again, we can get into that on Gotta Get Up, which we'll go next week, Thursday. Brian Florentin and Gigi Spear is actually going to join us. So I'm pretty excited for that. Other things I wanted to talk about, man, oh man. And I wrote about this for CBS today. I'm actually going to pull up that article. Over half of the coaching staff, or over half of the head coaches for the WNBA, are without jobs. The half of the teams are going into the offseason, which includes an expansion draft, without a head coach. And I wrote about why I think this is happening. And I think there are a few different things, including that, honestly, we have to take a look at what's happening at the GM level, because not all of this, in my opinion, is just bad coaching. I mean, some of it is. Some of these coaches, I think it was just stagnancy. I think with Stephanie White, maybe a little bit more on the personal side of things. I don't want to speculate, but she herself in her exit interviews with the Connecticut Sun said that it was a very tough time for her family. So if there's a coaching job that gets her a little bit closer to family, or for any number of reasons is going to be a little bit easier on her and her family, I think that's where we're going to see Stephanie White, which all signs point to Indiana. Steph White has coached Indiana. She's been a head coach, an assistant coach. She's been a player there. So that makes a lot of sense. But, we'll see there. But if you want to check out my take on the coaching changes happening in the WNBA, I put that in the chat. You can read it over at CBS Sports. I get into a lot of stuff in that article, and stuff that I definitely want to cycle back to. So go check it out. Unrivaled. Now, a lot of people have been speculating that Unrivaled is, trying to get Caitlin Clark. I don't know if that's true. I heard the rumors. What up, Daniel Berry? Hey, thanks for joining us on Tempestade Talk. This is where we talk Seattle Storm. Tempestade is the Portuguese word for storm. So, but you know how we do in the shoot around, we just do women's basketball topics. I don't know. A lot of people speculating that Unrivaled is trying to make some really big moves to get Caitlin Clark. I don't know. I don't know about that. And there's also a part of me, just because of how they've talked about equity and how they've talked about equitable pay and things of that nature. I really hope some of the reports aren't true, because I don't know, just doesn't seem so equitable to me. That being said, they did land a multi-year deal with TNT Turner for broadcasting rights. And sometimes with those deals, maybe, I'm not reporting anything. I'm just saying what could be possible in the realm of sports business. Maybe it's like, hey, we'll get you this deal. You get us Caitlin Clark. I don't know. We'll have to see, but they're expanding from 30 players to 36. Basically, that just means that each of the 6 teams is going to have one additional player, but that means and Nafisa Collier announced that on social media. And a part of the reason they were able to expand is because they had exceeded projections for their capital and fundraising, and their ability to bring in money and capital. So that's awesome. So we'll see. I am hoping to get down to Florida for that. Another thing, the WNBPA opts out of the CBA. I alluded to that just a little while ago. We definitely want to have Roberta on here. We're going to hear a little bit, some snippets from Nneka Ogwumike on that matter, from the exit interviews. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I think the big thing here, and we're going to get into it a little bit more on today's episode of Tempestade Talk, but I really think that, there's a lot of money coming in, a lot of eyes, a lot of attention coming to the WNBA. Am I surprised? No, because again, I watched Shattered Glass, which is the documentary about the WNBPA. I speak to people about the CBA a lot. And even Stewie, who again, former Storm player, now at the New York Liberty, in that documentary said, do I want us to opt out? Absolutely. And so again, we'll get into that a little bit. And then, but I want to get into the first quarter. Hey, Aloysius, good evening. I don't think Stephanie White should be hired as the Fever coach. She never won with the Sun. What makes you think she can win with the Fever? I mean, that's interesting. That's really interesting because, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, it seems like it's a little hard to win in Connecticut. I do wonder what's going to happen there, Aloysius. Hello, Beta Basket. Join us here. But I think it's going to be interesting. But in our first quarter, so y'all know how we do. We do the shoot around, and then we get into our specific topics. So we're going to do that now, and we're going to get into the first quarter. So we're going to talk Seattle Storm. As you can see, we like to keep it engaging. So if you have any comments or questions, put them in the chat. But I don't know what's been going on with the Seattle Storm. Mercedes Russell, who did not participate in the media exit interviews. I was there, so was Roberta. We can attest to the fact that Mercedes Russell did not participate in that, and then kind of made some comments on social media that created some speculation. So there was a post regarding the coaching exodus, that I mentioned earlier. And I guess Mercedes Russell commented under the comment something akin to, "Hey Damien, what's good? What's good?" Something akin to, all these coaches and Noel Quinn not fired. And then it was kind of like a few emojis, basically kind of chuckling, kind of laughing. Mercedes Russell said regarding that comment, which was on Instagram, because that's my homegirl's comment. And technically, my contract ended September 25th. So who's my coach? But it didn't stop there. There were some other comments that Mercedes made, and then, of course, speculation. Someone said, I don't know if you noticed, but they're cooking you in the replies and quotes. And Mercedes Russell saying it's not cooking when you don't give a bloop. So you can guess what word she used. And the reason that I wanted to address this is because, well, it is happening in the Seattle Storm. It's happening in the news. So I just think that it's something interesting that we want to talk about. But also, there was a post in, a group for Seattle Storm fans saying anyone else noticed chemistry was seemingly non-existent between the coaching staff and most of the players as the season wore on, hearing more and more rumors that Noel Quinn and her coaches were allegedly abusive towards staff and players alike, threatened a player, creating a hostile environment for players, caused division among players, called players slurs. I'm not going to say some of these words, and all kinds of other abusive terms. I'm hearing it was so bad that the president of ticket sales quit. He couldn't take the toxicity anymore. Hope there is resolution soon, especially with all of the coaching changes happening right now. Now, this was surprising for me to see because I'd never heard anything even remotely close to this. I just hadn't. Roberta, okay, hold on. I see you chatting in the. I will get you the link, but I also need these notes. So don't hijack my notes. Don't hijack the notes. I need the notes. I need the notes. So I lost where I'm at here. But anyway, so we I just found, especially that post that came from Facebook, that was really super surprising. Like, I don't know where that came from. That doesn't sound like anything I've personally experienced. But again, I mean, what I can say and what we're about to talk about, and this will give me a chance troubleshoot with Roberta, but keep the notes the way they are, homie. I need the notes. I'm going to play something from Noel Quinn in the exit interviews, because one thing is for sure. After their first round exit, there were some things, and even before then, Skylar Diggins-Smith got into this team at times. Noel Quinn has spoken to it. Sammy Whitcomb addressed it. There were times where, and no names were explicitly said, you can maybe look at the rotations or the minutes, especially on the back end of the season, and maybe make some guesses. But the effort at times from this Seattle Storm team didn't seem to be where this team wanted to be, where the leadership wanted to be. And I mean coaches, but also some of the player leadership. So I don't know what's going on exactly. I'm going to figure out how to get Roberta in here. But, I think that we have to talk about this. We certainly have to keep an eye on it, because I don't know about some of the extremes reporting. Again, that just doesn't seem like it seems outside of what I have personally witnessed or have experienced. I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's false. I'm just telling you what I've experienced. But there also has been some tension around how this team was performing this year, which leads me to the question that we have in YouTube. The question being, was this season a failure? It's kind of a question now that is asked around sports at the end of the year. I have my opinions. I'm sure y'all have your opinions. You can put them in the chat if you want. But was this a failure? Was this season a failure from the perspective of the Seattle Storm? We're going to get into that. But here's Noel Quinn, I think, with some illuminating conversation regarding, again, the effort and what it takes to play in a Seattle Storm uniform. I'm going to do this, and hopefully we can figure out where Roberta is in the interwebs. So here's Noel Quinn.
No, I feel like even in this interview and yesterday, there's been some kind of maybe talk about either disappointment with effort or not playing with enough pride with the Storm jersey and stuff. Kind of a little bit of a disconnect. Even the players kind of hinted at that a little bit. Um, is that something you think can be mended as far as like worked on and fixed with the current squad, or is it maybe having to change up some things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, sometimes when I talk to you guys, it's immediately after a high emotional situation. And even today, I don't feel like I've had enough time to evaluate thoroughly. Um, so I don't want to, speak out of just high emotion. There's some reality to the fact that our team has to change, Jeff, because of their expansion draft, so and free agency. Every year a team looks a little bit different. And so the hope is to continue to bring in players that have that mindset that we've been kind of harping on all year. And the players that are going to be here and remain here to make sure that, that's never the top topic anymore. Pride, effort, those things should never be those things should always be a top of mind and on our hearts and how we show up to play because it's you know we can't we can't take an opportunity like this for granted. Can't waste time. We can't waste moments, and I think that that's going to continue to be the sentiment. Yeah.
So I think we have Roberta in here now, but I mean that's Noel Quinn talking, quite frankly, and it was also a conversation in the last game in the regular season, or excuse me, in the post game when the Seattle Storm lost to Vegas. And so again, I do think some of what has been reported on, I don't know if I want to say reported. Some of the things that have been shared on social media seem to be a little bit outside of what I understood to be going on with the Seattle Storm. I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just saying it's very surprising to me. But again, I wanted to anchor it in what we absolutely do know, which is that Noel Quinn and again other people at times throughout the season, including Skylar Diggins Smith, have been discontent, dissatisfied with, as you just heard Noel Quinn say, the effort. But Horeta, okay, we got you in here. Let's
I'm
back
here.
backtrack just a little bit here. I mean, some of the reports, Mercedes Russell, first, let's start with you and I were there for exit interviews. Mercedes Russell did not participate in exit interviews with media. That's a fact.
Yeah.
Did not happen. Waited, even saw Mercedes Russell in the building, but did not come to speak to us with media. So, what were you making, given that context? What did you make of some of what happened on social media that kind of got her in this firestorm of maybe abusive behavior happening in Seattle?
First off, hello and good evening. um, just happy to be back with Tempestade Talk. I missed our conversations, but congratulations on the New York Liberty win. Uh, so, yeah, Mercedes Russell did not participate in the exit interviews. That's something that Tina Charles had done the year that she was there, I think 2022. Uh no, not 2022, 2021. So it definitely, like, when you put the pieces together, it does give room for a narrative that can be negative surrounding the team. And she commented that in a post that talked about how 6 of the 12 WNBA teams are out of a coach right
Yeah,
now.
and we talked about that, but I want to get like I want because you are our expert. Like, what is the vibe? Like, are these posts like is there abuse happening? Are you familiar with any of that specifically coming from the coaching staff to either other staff or toward the players? Like, that's what I really because that's the tea here. Like Mercedes Russell
Yeah.
not participating in media exit interviews. I mean, again, that kind of happens, but it seems to be very much focused around coaching and whether Noel Quinn should be one of the coaches perhaps without a job.
I have never heard anyone say anything negative about Noel Queen. And talking to my sources, who are people that are close to the situation, to the locker room and player movement, there is a lot of appreciation for Noel Queen, and there's a lot of care for Noel Queen. Uh, I do know that there's a lot of insatisfaction from a certain player whose family has been on social media, even talking negatively about Noel Queen.
Okay,
Uh,
I mean, you got to say the player's name. I mean, especially
Jewel
if
Lloyd.
okay,
Jewel
yeah,
Lloyd.
yeah.
Jewel Lloyd. Yeah. So we saw during the finals, sorry, not during the finals, during the playoffs, her mom was commenting on social media talking about how, you can't score if your coach doesn't put you in. And then even in the Storm Crazies group, you have Mama Lloyd, Gwendolyn Lloyd, making those comments. You have Mercedes Russell's aunt, I think, also making similar comments, and at times even asking for Noel to be removed, which in my opinion sheds a really bad, casts just a bad light on the players that are connected to you, like we saw that those comments from Mercedes Russell, and she's very close to Jewel Lloyd. I think they're like probably like in terms of like team knowing each other, they're very close, they're friends. So it's not, the complaint is coming from that side. Other than that, I have never heard anything. What my sources have said, and again, people who are very close to the situation, is that there is a lot of dissatisfaction on the Jewel Lloyd side and the people who are with her. So I believe that that's where. Oops, I'm sorry, my light fell. I believe that that's where it's coming from. That post itself, it didn't even look like an actual person. I don't think it was a bot, but I wouldn't. I will go as far as saying that it could be a burner account. They also edited that post saying that the president of ticket sales had quit. The president of ticket sales has not quit. It was the senior manager of PR, and it's because of family. He wants to spend more time with his family.
Jeff Hoffman, yes, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the person edited the post. So I think that there was a very like biased post in that group. I don't even think people should have given it that much attention, but it became all that. I think
Yeah.
because Mercedes had made that comment, so it became
Yeah.
like a snowball.
Exactly. And that's why I was like, let's get to what we're hearing.
Yeah.
Let's root it in what we know to be fact. Like you said,
Yeah.
we know Jeff Hoffman, and he sent us as media members just like a, hey, I'm moving on kind of message. And you and I, again, were
Yeah.
at exit interviews and had a conversation briefly where it was like, I didn't know, I didn't know what was happening, but I just kind of picked up a conversation in passing, and I was like, oh, it sounds like, maybe there are going to be some staff changes. So even associating Jeff's departure with this kind of energy is disingenuous, because that was already in the works. So
Exactly.
that's why I just wanted to clear the air. But I will say, and I was getting into this, and this is what we did last year on Gotta Get Up, and what we will do this year for Tempestagi Talk. But we're doing our big overall, big picture team season in review today. And then we're going to go, including Noel Quinn, we're going to go player by player and do a season in review. And I do think, Roberta, when we do the season in review, when it comes to Jewel Lloyd, we're going to have to talk about productivity. Now, Jewel Lloyd literally was the top scorer last season, to the point where she was a peak performance award winner. And that was not a winning Seattle Storm team. Not even close to, again, the expectation. We heard in the offseason from the Seattle Storm that they want to get back to the winning ways. And so they do this massive, push in free agency. something between then and the exit interviews that we had this year, there was a disconnect somewhere. So to hear that Jewel Lloyd's family, maybe even Mercedes Russell's family is venting. I mean, we see this in sports. We've seen it, we've certainly seen it in the WNBA. And I do think there is a there, as they say, there's
Yeah.
something to discuss. Now, whether it's related to, again, you and I both saying the same thing, never heard anything even remotely close
Yeah.
to associating some of the disrespect or just flat out unprofessional behavior.
Yeah.
Never have heard that associated. Again, playing that clip from Noelle Quinn, and there's another clip that I'm about to play here, Roberta. I think we know that the Seattle Storm, something was going on in that locker room that left a bad taste in the mouth for Noelle Quinn. And she did not mince words in saying that
No, she didn't.
this team will be better. And I think as we go player by player, it was very illuminating, Roberta, to sit there and to hear the difference in players that maybe do feel a little bit more committed, whether because of their literal contract or because they want to be in Seattle, versus people who know that they're free agents. Sammy Whitcomb is one of those players. Her conversation with us was very evident that she, and again, we're going to go player by player, but I'm just using one example. She's a player that her conversation was very different than Nneka or Skylar or some other players who, again, are under contract. But I want you to hear from Noelle Quinn again, because, again, we want to anchor this and root this in what's happening, not our full preview or season in review on Noelle Quinn, but there's just so much heat coming to the Seattle Storm that I wanted to play so you can hear her words exactly. And then after this clip, Roberta, I want you to maybe take a stab at Aloysius has a comment here that I think is interesting. So, but here's Noelle Quinn. As soon as it plays. There we go. Maybe now.
Ended as far as like worked on and fixed with the current squad, or is it maybe, having to change up some things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, sometimes when I talk to you guys, it's immediately after a high emotional situation. And even today, I don't feel like I've had enough time to evaluate thoroughly. So I don't want to, speak out of just high emotion. There's some reality to the fact that our team has to change, Jeff, because of their expansion draft, so and free agency. Every year a team looks a little bit different. And so the hope is to continue to bring in players that have that mindset that we've been kind of harping on all year, and the players that are going to be here and remain here to make sure that, that's never the topic anymore. Pride, effort, those things should never be those things should always be a top of mind and on our hearts and how we show up to play, because it's, we can't take an opportunity like this for granted. Can't waste time. We can't waste moments. And I think that that's going to continue to be the sentiment.
I mean, again, it's just clear here, Roberta, that Noelle Quinn felt that there was an expectation that wasn't met. So I want to get to Aloysius's question, but I also want the second quarter is all about, was this a failure? Let's talk about, again, some stats and facts. 25-15, finished 5th overall, much better than 11 wins last season. They do lose in, that first round to Las Vegas. And the reason I think it's a valid question is because, and we've talked about this, this was, for some people, they were like a super team light. And playing Vegas in the first round is not easy. And, the expectation is that this is a Seattle Storm team that had enough pieces to get beyond the first round. So just straight up, was this a failure of a season?
I don't think it was a failure of a season. I feel like there were talks of super team, and we have discussed this at length here in the podcast, that super team is not just great players together. It also depends on the moment that the player those players are in right now. And I don't think that was the case for the Storm. finishing fifth overall with a brand new roster, and after coming from an 11th place season, I don't consider a failure. I consider a win. I think that the transition was very quick. Noel Quinn had to adapt fast, and I think it's very important to remind people of how building a team works. Sometimes a coach doesn't have a say on which player is coming. So Noel Quinn adapted very fast to all of the changes that were thrown at her. And honestly, I think that the fifth place was a win. I think that going to the playoffs was, although a guarantee, you couldn't expect that team not to go to the playoffs. I think it was a win.
Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And it does feel, and this is, when you look at the stats and the facts, I think you can make that argument. There's also a feeling that this team underachieved. Now, whether you want to say full on failure or not, but there were moments in this season, in the regular season, and certainly how things ended in the postseason, that this felt like this team fell short of its potential. And when that happens, there are a lot of different things that you can point to. Again, the narrative that seems to be coming out of almost said Kraken, Seattle Storm camp. Kraken, last I checked, they were losing 3-0 to Toronto. But whatever. I'll talk about that on another podcast tomorrow. It just seemed like the potential fell short. And so just to take it, not to make it, we always say not to make it about the Mystics on Gotta Get Up. And I guess on this podcast, I'll say not to make it all about the New York Liberty, but to use the New York Liberty as an example. There were people, and again, I mentioned this at the top of the show, there's kind of this thing happening, and I think it's just to be a little controversial, where people will ask someone at the end of the season, anyone basically who didn't win a championship, it's like, was this a failure of a season? It's like a very sports news thing that we're doing these days. So I want to be honest about that. But I think also it's because I used to be like, why would you ask someone that question? That's so stupid. That's a stupid question to ask. And then the more I thought about it, I do think it's a valid question. Now, maybe it's framed, and I even asked Noel Quinn this question last year in exit interviews. I said, I want to be thoughtful in how I frame this, but the way we talk about sports, it is you either win or you lose. You succeed or you fail. So to ask someone if this was a failure or a success of a season, I do think is fair. That being said, context is extremely important. So I agree with what you said. And even Noel Quinn, I think I have one more clip here that we'll play a little bit later, but Noel Quinn basically saying this team had enough to be in the WNBA finals. Now I'm going to be honest, Roberta, I hear you, Noel Quinn. I hear you. But for all of the reasons that you just mentioned about it takes time, I think they could have been a team that got a little further in the playoffs. Do I think this was a team that was guaranteed to go to the WNBA finals? No.
No. And I think that the story of the Storm this season is before the break and after the break. Before the break, the Storm was performing. I'm talking more in terms of like the general picture, combining everything. Before the playoffs, they were doing really well. Before the Olympic break, I think they were third. And then after the break, that's when it started going downhill, and those issues started to rise. So in that sense, I agree that it was a failure. I do think that they underperformed, and to be very honest, I think it was more of like a psych thing. It was more about mentality rather than their basketball. In that sense, I do think it was a failure. I'm always like I try to sometimes I'm scared of using some words because of the language barrier, but in that sense, I do think it was a failure. At the same
Yeah.
time, in terms of general, like in terms of team project and progression, it was progress from
Right.
last year.
Right.
But but when you have, Jewel Lloyd, NECA, Skylar, and then again the second half you add Gabby Williams, you can't go that bad, and you can't let the aces put on 16 points on you, 16 points of advantage on you in the first quarter in a game 2 of the first round of the playoffs.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get into that for sure. Henna,
Yep.
I think I know where you're coming from, especially because I said not to make it all about the New York Liberty, but I think the Seattle Storm season highlighted how successful the 2023 Liberty season, I think you mean, actually was. And I think that is a really valid point. I'm assuming that's what you mean, Henna. If I misinterpreted it, please let me know. But the New York Liberty got banged, and you and I, Roberta, have talked about this on the podcast. They got freaking annihilated. Also, I mean, can we finally be honest about this? And I have all of the bias in the world because I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New York Liberty fan, and I host a New York Liberty podcast. But like, people hate on the New York Liberty just because. Like, I'm like, okay,
yes,
that's so interesting to me because they're like one of the most chill teams as far as personality. But anyway, not to make it all about the New York Liberty. But they got banged. They were a failure. They didn't have time to gel. They built this super team and they failed without context, though.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, to your point, was the season generally a failure? No. Was it a failure? Did it fall short? And maybe failure is where people get tripped up because I don't like using that word. Did it fall short of expectation? Did this Seattle Storm season fall short of expectation? I think we can both agree that yes, it did.
Yes, and if I can say something before we play the next clip, I gotta say, I think it's a good thing that the Storm is receiving some heat right now because the Liberty got so much heat last year, and got all the smoke, and the Storm this year was supposed to be, they were supposed to perform much better, and you had players saying there was no, like, you have to want to win. I think people are very soft on the Storm, and I think that's part of the. I think it's part of the Seattleite mentality. I think that there is, like, people are very, as someone who is Latina, lived most of her USA life in New York and then moved to Seattle. People here are extremely passive aggressive, and like the confrontation is something that doesn't exist much. So everything is like, no, it's okay, it's fine. So when Skylar Diggins-Smith and Gabby Williams spoke the words of, like, people are not working, that can be perceived, and you see in the fan groups, the truth is that Storm fans did not like Skylar Diggins-Smith before she got here, and she was under a lot of scrutiny with the Storm crazies with the fans, because people are like, oh, you can't talk like that in a team that you just arrived. But honestly,
well, I mean, Tina Charles and Skylar Diggins-Smith are not the same person. Let's just be clear.
No,
they're not. And they both got some spice, and they're gonna keep it a buck. And they're gonna go out and do what they got to do, and the hell with what y'all want to do. I'm gonna play basketball. If y'all show up, cool. If y'all don't show up, I don't know what to tell you. But I know what I am gonna say. I'm gonna tell you about yourself. Skylar Diggins-Smith and Tina Charles are both like that. And so Tina Charles,
exactly.
Now listen, Tina Charles deserves some of the smoke she gets. Like, let's keep it a buck. I'll be the first one. I'll also be the first one to say Tina Charles don't deserve all the smoke that people put on her legacy. Not even close. And even Sue Bird stepped up and said, we don't make it to the playoffs without Tina.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember that. And I thought that it was so called for, because again, the Seattle Storm fan bases and Seattleites themselves it is kind of problematic, especially with, I'm just gonna say it, with Black players with a personality.
Ooh,
Uh,
talk
they
about
are
it.
used to Sue Bird, Brianna Stewart, Jewel Lloyd is always a little more quiet.
Yeah, she's more
S-
reserved, which is she
yeah,
is. Yeah.
it's just, personal type of personality.
Mhm.
Storm fans are not used to Black women with that, use their voice and speak up.
Yeah.
And that's a Seattle problem. That is a
Mm.
Seattle problem.
Mm.
I've heard people here call Skylar Dickey Smith crazy before she joined the organization. So there are lots of problems. What I didn't like about the whole Twitter thing is that it
Yeah.
was a dig at NECA. I don't think it's fair to come for NECA because there's a big separation with things. And like, I think that the Storm, like, fan bases needs to adapt better. They're like, they're used to Sue Bird, they are used to Brianna Stewart, and look at Brianna Stewart once she left the Storm. Brianna Stewart is a
Mm.
whole new person.
You're right about that. She let all that New York come out.
Yeah, she is a whole new person. Here in New York, she was constrained. Here in Seattle, she was, there were
Interesting.
things that she couldn't, it wasn't her team. And
Right.
you just saw, like, once she left and when she did that, I'll never forget that. Guys, I make the right decision. Storm fans got so mad at her, and
Wow.
there's so much bitterness towards Stewie here. So someone texted me and was like, I can be happy for Stewie winning with the New York Liberty, and I'm like, are you crazy? Like, what?
I
It's
mean,
not
okay.
personal.
It's not. I will say. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't remember me personally as a fan. Like, I'm a Mets fan. And was there, I don't think there's ever been a player where I was like, oh, you're going to go sign with that team. I personally have never done that, but I will say fan bases do go there. They do.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a part of that. Like, for example, I'll use something that I said very openly. Quiet as a church mouse. I've talked about last year leading into the 2024 season. Of course, 2023 Las Vegas Aces win the championship. They were one of the teams, along with the New York Liberty, that kind of had like these little mini docu-series to chronicle, and it just so happened those two teams were in the finals. And so I was watching both of those as I was reporting on the finals. And when it got to the time to watch their documentary in full or their parade, I didn't watch it. I ain't watching that. Like, I know I'm a national WNBA journalist, but nobody asked me. I was not on assignment to write about the parade, so I didn't do it. Nobody asked me to watch or write about or talk about on a podcast their documentary, so I didn't watch it because as a Liberty fan, as a New Yorker, I ain't watching that. I ain't watching it. So I understand.
Yeah.
Like, I understand to an extent. Like, you don't want to be all the way live happy for Stewie, and come on. Like, it gets to a certain point. But that being said, I think what's also fair is that this is still Raw. You have a player who was being, I hate using the G word, so I'm going to find a different word. She was being, she was under the apprenticeship, right? Of an all-time WNBA legend, Sue Bird. Now, let's also remember, and I talked to Sue about this a few times because I wanted to hear it directly from her. Sue Bird thought about leaving Seattle in free agency. To go where?
She did. New York.
To go where?
New York.
To go New York, which is her home.
Yep. And I know that there was attempt at it. There was, like,
for sure. I like I said, I talked to Sue multiple. I was like, Sue, tell me the truth. How real? She's like, oh no, it was extremely dead.
Yep.
Dead ass, as we say in New York, dead ass real. Dead ass. Like, that was real. until
Until
Stewie.
Brianna Stewart. And Sue Bird said that like Brianna Stewart saved her career. And I saw a comment here saying that if Stewie would have left a year early, if Sue would have retired a year early. That's true.
Whoop. I
True.
mean, yeah, because, and what are the reasons? That's a question we have to ask first. We have to ask Stewie.
Yeah.
And I will say, from someone who reports on the New York Liberty, at least part of it seemed to be wanting to, as she was starting a family, be
Yeah.
closer to family. That's real.
Mhm.
Being across the country
Yeah.
can be tough. Now, was that all? I don't know. Maybe not. Sounds like maybe there's another thing. But again, this is not a podcast for New York
Yeah.
Liberty fans, so we're going to flip the script. So I understand being a little salty because you
Yeah.
have Stewie and Jewel and Sue. And you would love to think that Stewie then steps into that role
Yeah.
in Seattle. That's what she was effectively, again, being trained to do. She was learning from one of the best to ever do it, not in her position, which I think is also important. And some of what we saw in what we saw and are seeing in New York, you can be a leader, you can be the go-to. And it's a little, not impossible, but it's a little bit more difficult when you're a post player as opposed to when you're a true point guard.
Yeah. And to tie back to the whole conversation that we were have about like what's going on with the Storm, why are they getting the smoke? You know, you think Stewie left. There was an expectation that Stewie owed it to the Storm.
Like take the reins. Yep.
Yeah, there was this expectation, and up to the day before it was announced.
Aloysius just being messy.
I have no idea what that means. I don't know. But there was expectation that she was going to stay, so people feel like she betrayed them.
Yeah.
And the thing is that up until the day before, there was this delusion that there was no way that she would ever leave the Storm, you know? So it's and again, living in Seattle, being here for so many years, being like extremely, close to the sports community here, there's a sense of entitlement from the Seattle community that Stewie should have stayed because she owed it, she owed it to them. And even like Sue was saying herself, like on Twitter, that like, if Stewie's wife is from Spain, like, do you know how much easier it is to go from New York to Spain? Like, it makes sense, so again, and I talk about Stewie because she's intrinsic to the Storm history. I think she was chosen the third best player in the franchise history, etc. So I think that it all started there. Like the Storm didn't have a plan for a post Sue life. They were certain
that was evident because. As much as I do we know Jewel Lloyd was right there, right alongside Stewie and Sue.
Mm-hmm.
We know that. And the transition without Stewie was a very heavy burden for Jewel. We kind of alluded to it. And Jewel talked about it a lot last season, Roberta. She had to learn how to lead differently. She'd never had that responsibility, period.
And
I don't know whether it was realistic or not, but it doesn't seem, to your point about a plan, it doesn't feel to me, as someone observing the team the year before this past season, so 2023, but also listening to what Jewel was saying in 2023, it didn't seem that Jewel Lloyd, whether she knew it or not, she absolutely didn't fully embrace that leadership role until she had to figure that out in 2023, which is so interesting because then you flash forward to 24, the team does re-up apparently, as the story folklore goes, we've heard it from Skylar Diggins-Smith, we've heard it from Jewel Lloyd. She helped recruit Sky. And so then you have someone that has that true leadership and has it at the point guard position come in. And it
Yeah.
felt like, and then you bring in NECA, who is the leader of leaders. Like, she's literally
Yeah.
the president of the WNBPA. And you talk about like a certain way to lead, or how in Seattle, Black women are perceived. I hate saying this, but I also think it's true. NECA is the right type of Black woman in power to come to a place like Seattle, because NECA, the poise, the demeanor that she carries, she is, I want to say she's calculated, because I think it's true, but I
Yeah.
don't mean it I don't mean it in a negative way. It's not because she's withholding, it's because she's thoughtful. That's probably the better way to say it. She's a very thoughtful person.
Yes.
And we're going to hear
Yes.
from NECA, especially on the PA, a little bit later.
Yeah.
But she's the right kind of, or the quote unquote acceptable type of leader to be in Seattle, from how you explained it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because, like I said, the perception of Skylar has always been very biased. And the reason why I traced all the way back to, the post Sue and Stewie is because I think that that's the reason why the Storm failed. I think that they were not ready to have the amount of talent that they had in the team, and I even believe that they didn't prepare Jewel Lloyd for that.
It seems that way. Yeah.
Because I know that Jewel Lloyd was like promised the world by the Storm organization. She was like the face of the franchise. And another thing, early in the season, is Skylar was saying, "Yeah, I came into this team, and I know that this is Jewel Lloyd's team. So like, I'm going to take a step back and learn." And then at the, you were there at the exit interviews. She was like, "Yeah, I saw myself as a leader from the start." Like she said, "I felt comfortable being a leader here." So there has been a shift of power, there has been a leadership thing. And, again, from being like, I watched every single Storm game in the past years. Jewel is a player who depends a lot on her emotions. Jewel is a player who she has the Mamba mentality, but she's also she ebbs and flows a lot. And I think that you you can expect a team to go to the finals. Exactly what Skylar said. In this league, if you're not ready to play every night, you're going to lose. And then another thing, look at the Storm bench and look at the bench usage. Why did the Liberty win? Because Sabrina had her hand hurt, Stewie was being trapped from every side, but then you had Leo, you had KB, you had all like those players from the bench, and the Lynx was not able to utilize their bench properly. So
in game 5 alone,
yeah,
got 15 bench points. They had 75% shooting from free throw line from the bench. They had over 50% from the floor from the bench, and they win that game. They won by like 5 or 6 points in overtime. They had 15 bench points. That's more than the spread.
Niara Savali,
Savali.
The thing is that like the Storm bench, this is a league of 12 teams now, soon to be 13. This is a small league. Every team has the best players. If you don't utilize your bench properly, you're not gonna make it. And you look at the Storm bench, and it wasn't properly used. All due respect, Nika Mio should have put on the court sooner she should have been on the court sooner. She has like her style of play is something that the Storm could have benefited from, but I feel like they didn't allow her to develop. I think,
And this is where the WNBA is in a very precarious situation,
yeah,
because I understand completely why, whether you want to talk about Noelle Quinn, Sandy Brondello last season, Becky Hammond last season, and this season. I mean, we could go on and on and on. And Hazel's question is interesting. I don't have the raw data on this. I can tell you anecdotally, and my eye test says that yes, there is a relationship. And I will just talk about 2023 and 2024 championship games. How did the Las Vegas Aces win game 4 in Barclays Center without Chelsea Gray, without Kia Stokes, who was a starter?
Yep.
Their bench. How did the New York Liberty a year later win in Barclays Center game 5 in overtime against Minnesota? Leo and Niara, KT, Kayla Thornton with just critically timely hustle plays. Yes. So
Courtney Vandersloot.
Exactly. Vandersloot being a steadying presence overall. This is wild to me. I was telling someone this somewhere else today. In basically almost all of overtime, Sandy Brondello put 5 players on the court who never played even a second together. That 5-player combo never played one singular second in all of 2024 together until they had to go win the championship. That type of trust, that type of player development takes time. And so when you have a short season, when you don't have a development league, when you have a short training camp, when you just started charter flights, I mean, I could literally go on and on and on. When all of these things, when are you supposed to do that? The only chance you have is to try and keep as many of those players together and have the same coaching staff. Oh, but wait, in this offseason, we have over half of the coaches without a job. So when is that supposed to happen? When is that supposed to happen in the WNBA? And now we're going a little bit beyond just the Seattle Storm, but this is a massive issue. I wrote about it earlier today, but I want to get back though, Roberta, to some things. Now this is, we're kind of cheating a little bit because NECA is a member of the Seattle Storm, but we are going to hear from NECA and Gabby Williams on the CBA. Actually, I don't think both of these clips are the question directly that you asked, but you were asking a lot about the CBA. Obviously, NECA is the president of the WNBPA, the Players Association. So it just makes sense for us to talk about this because everything that we're talking about now, even just expanding the rosters, so that then you don't have to have players or teams decide whether they're going to try to play the free agency game and give the money from their salary cap to players who they think can make an immediate impact versus having depth. That's what these teams have had to deal with. And so that's why, hey, Ghost, this is your day. This is your day. Happy Halloween to all who celebrate. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It. I don't know if it's Theo or Teo, because again, not to make it all about the New York Liberty, but we want to be respectful either way. Thank y'all for joining. But I think all of what we're talking about and the conversations, Roberta, that are happening in the WNBA are directly related to what we're hearing the PA wants to talk about. So you know this, I know this. We're going to go over just some stats and facts. I want to get your thoughts because I know you're following this pretty closely. And then we're going to hear from Gabby. We're going to hear from NECA. But surprise, the WNBPA did opt out. We knew that was happening. We've talked about it before. Here are the priorities. And I'm going to read these through because this came directly from the announcement. So a new economic model transforming the current system, which imposes arbitrary and restrictive caps on the value and benefits players receive by introducing an equity-based model that grows and evolves in step with the league's business success. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot in there, but we're not going to go over all of it. We're going to do a deeper dive into the PA, but there is a lot. That is a packed, loaded. That is super loaded. Okay, the next thing is players' salaries, establishing clear distinctions between salary and bonuses, ensuring players receive wages that properly reflect their value and contributions to the league's growing business, minimum professional standards, implementing consistent minimum standards that align with other leading professional sports leagues, maintaining professional and safe environments across the league, including practice and game facilities. So maybe not booting a team out of their practice facility during the playoffs for a child's birthday party. I'm just saying, as well as travel accommodations, retirement benefits. I'm not going to read that one. And then pregnancy and family planning benefits. Not going to read that one either, because again, we're going to do a deeper dive. But again, Roberta, you have been following this. I know for a fact you and I were in the room when NECA talked a little bit about this. Now, we spoke to NECA. This was pre the opt-out vote. So we're going to play, because NECA did talk about that. She said our first priority is to get as much participation in the vote. Speaking of, we have an election coming up in the United States. Look at not just federal, but state and local. Okay. Make sure you do that if you haven't already. But I want to get your thoughts on where the conversation stands, given that the WNBA is expanding. So there's expansion money coming in. There was the capital raise. There will be more ownership groups coming in. When you look at these priorities, what do you want to see, or what do you think will be a part of the negotiations?
I think a word that has been touched on a lot is equity. The league today does not have equity. Players do not have, there isn't a balance. Players, only like less than 10% of the league revenue is, gets to the players. And that's why salaries are so low. I made a whole research on that. This is a topic that I am very passionate. I was not surprised at all. I was in a podcast this last week where they asked me, were you surprised that they opted out the very next day? I was like, no. I was like, I feel like they were very mindful of the finals and didn't want to take they wanted to keep the lights on, the attention on the finals, but they wanted out of that. I think I think Lindsay D'Arcangelo on X said, rip that thing and burn it because it's so outdated. Players have been talking a lot about the hard cap, whereas the NBA has a soft cap. So in the NBA, teams can pay a fine and use their resources for whatever the team needs in terms of roster. In the WNBA, everything is so just hard capped. So this doesn't help when in terms of injuries. So teams that have players injured, they have to suspend the player, bring another one, and that's when you get all of the 7-day contracts.
7-day
that's
contract.
When you get that's when you get why this player is on a 7-day contract for how many
Odyssey
weeks now.
Sims, her name might as well be Odyssey 7-day contract Sims. As just one example.
Yeah, so my question to NECA was just very targeted on revenue share, because this is, the main thing was charter flights, but that has been, players got that. However, and that's something that Elizabeth Williams said in the Good Game podcast, she was like, we want that in writing. The charter flights happened this year because
I've been following this, and I spoke to Terry Jackson about this. It was wild to me because I was the one at All-Star who asked her, was there an addendum to the CBA? When will that, if not, if one doesn't exist now, how will an addendum be added? And she basically was like, oh, well, we did charters just because we could.
Yeah. Exactly. And so one shout out to you and to an article that you wrote. It was my favorite. I don't know if it was the headline or just the first sentence. I think that you wrote that the WNBA charter flight rollout has had a bumpy ride, and I thought it has been a bumpy ride. I thought it was amazing. I had a kick out of that.
I mean, it's been
yeah.
so rocky, but yeah, that's definitely a thing.
So yeah, they
I
want
mean,
that in writing.
they absolutely should. And again, when you think about hard cap, soft cap, when you think about bonuses versus salaries,
Yeah,
I haven't seen it in the high priorities, but I personally would love to see the WNBPA really find a way to work in expanding rosters per team.
yes,
I think that absolutely has to be on the table. And listen, here's the thing, that I can't imagine that's not on their radar. That being said, if they shoot for the stars, there's the saying, you shoot for the stars, you land, or you shoot for the moon, you land among the stars, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But if the PA is reaching and really going for everything that they want aspirationally, then in a negotiation, they can land somewhere where they get that, because the league, I'm just saying as a hypothetical, could be like, okay, well, we're not going to do this, but what we can do is, just because we wanted to, Kathy Engelbert, what we can do is immediately add 2 more roster spots. Boom. Exactly. I mean, I don't know, for whatever. And so that serves the purpose of increasing the salary cap. I would imagine. I freaking would hope that they increase the salary cap if they expand the roster size per team. But just as an example, but again, we're going to go deeper into this. I do want to, let's go to NECA. I have some clips from NECA and Gabby. I want to play that. I think the clip of both of them together is just over a minute. So we're going to play that and then get into a little bit more of Roberta and I talking about the CBA, but then we're going to get into the fourth quarter, which means it's time for your questions and comments. So if you have questions and comments, or you have comments and questions for us, put them in the chat now, and we'll start rolling that out in the fourth quarter.
And say that players do want to have their value reflected in CBAs moving forward, in contracts moving forward, and all the things that include numbers that we don't have full transparency on. So going in the direction of having that visibility for us to be able to adequately value ourselves, especially as we see the growth of the business, is something that I know players are talking much about right now.
When I talk about prioritization, I understand that, you need to have players here. It is hard to come late, I admit. But the W thinks that they don't have to pay us more in order for us to be here. And I think I didn't express that when I first talked about prioritization. Our commissioner talked about us being able to, make 700,000. That's not true at all. There's not one player who makes that. And we were promised, team marketing agreements and league marketing agreements, but they've fallen quite short. So it's still not enough for us international players to want to stay here. And that's a choice of the players. If I make a choice to make more money and whatever, and then the teams are mad that I don't come back, but that's how it is. So yes, it just the WNBA, if you want us to be here, you have to pay us more. It's business, it's how it works, and that's all that means.
It's business. And I loved that clip was a part of the rollout for the slogan of the CBA opt-out. It's business, which I love, because again, this has been in the works for a while. To your point about they waited, they were patient, they were thoughtful of the WNBA finals, and then went and cooked. So there's so much. So much in this CBA, so much in the opt-out. And I can also say, I was at an event, and it sounds to me like from the PA perspective, they want to move swiftly. They want to be able to have the initial conversations as soon as possible. And we know there's an expansion draft, of course, but my sources are telling me that if the PA has it their way, they would have their first meeting with the league to discuss the CBA before the expansion draft it's basically next month in December.
Going through the CBA, what you see is very little power to players and a lot of power, like almost full power to the league and owners. So there, for example, when it comes to expansion draft, it's all at the discretion of the league. When it comes to changing changing the schedule, all at the discretion of the league. So the issue of equity is pretty much tied to the revenue share, because without proper revenue share, there's no higher salary, and there's no room for more roster spots. I personally don't know if the WNBA is ready for 50-50, but it needs to be at 60-40. I know that the cost of operation for the league has increased since the last CBA, but the revenue has also increased. So who makes the product attractive? The players. Who should have big share of the money? The players. Now the ownership structure of the WNBA also does not work on players favor. You have the WNBA, you have the NBA teams, and then you have an investor team. So that all has to be, players really need to push, and honestly, owners need to let go of that entitlement. In terms of prioritization, they think that they can control players' careers. And if you're gonna ask players to forego opportunities in other places, then you have to pay them enough that being here is enough, that what you're paying them is gonna be enough. And that's what Gabby's saying. Like, she earns in euros, which is worth more than dollars. So does it make sense for her to be here? She's already like a very established player. It's not like she needs the WNBA, and it might come down to it. You've had instances in which Diana Taurasi sat down to play for her Russian team.
What was that,
So
2015 or something like that?
Oh yeah, it was a while ago. So and it's gonna start happening more because
I mean, Emma
the truth
Meesseman,
the truth is that players are not taking the BS anymore. They are not taking it.
I do think there's a little more nuance to prioritization, but again, we're going to get into that. We're going to have off season where not only are we going to do a deep dive on Noelle Quinn and the rest of the Seattle Storm roster, but we're also going to do deeper dive with some of our other Black Rosie Media contributors to some of these bigger topics, prioritization by way of the CBA and etc. But now it's time to get into the fourth quarter and listener comments. So many great comments, but I said we were going to get back to this one by Aloysius. I got to find it first. Okay. Now, do you think, Roberta, I'm going to remix this, is a given, obviously there's some saltiness. Obviously there has to be some work done to even repair those relationships if Jewell Loyd is to stay, but either if Jewell Loyd, and the team have those conversations and they can't find a way through, or maybe the organization just decides to move on and find someone who's a better fit, a la what Noelle Quinn was saying. I mean, do you think this is something that could really happen, Roberta? A trade for Jewell, or trading Jewell for another player, I should say.
I don't think it's impossible. And I think that this whole conversation this week, people are like, okay, so Mercedes Russell is commenting T on these things, and Jewell Loyd on TikTok with her girlfriend, they were talking about moving to Phoenix. So there has been a lot of conversation about it. I don't think it's impossible. I wouldn't be surprised at all if that happened. And it's all gonna come down to what Talisa and Pokey think is better for the team. We're gonna see who they're going to protect. I mean, we're not gonna see, but we're definitely gonna hear. Because
I'm so bothered that they won't show us the list. Like, show us the list, you cowards! Like, what
exactly?
What purpose does it serve to not show the list? Because the players.
And that's the kind of And that's the kind of thing that should be in the CBA, for example.
CBA.
Everything transparency
Hello.
is also something.
I agree.
So I don't think it's impossible, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see Jewel moving to another team.
Interesting. I also find it so interesting that Phoenix just seems and has been, for me at least, for a while. Even I love Sandy Brondello. I also sometimes Sandy gives me heart palpitations, and this is even before she became the New York Liberty head coach. I've said this for years. I'm like, Sandy, I don't know if I understand. I mean, I respect it. It doesn't make me comfortable, but I'm gonna rock with you because I believe in you. I believe in you. I don't know what's happening, but I believe in you. But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But like, if I don't understand what the draw is in Phoenix. But again, we can have that conversation. Interesting question. Should Seattle trade Mule? Harsh to say, but she's kind of damaged goods. That is way harsh, Ty. Way harsh.
Yeah.
Coming back from that kind of injury is no guarantee. Coming back from any kind of injury is no guarantee.
Yeah.
And the way that technology is moving, ACL tears are not career ending, especially not back in the day like it was for Cheryl Miller. Imagine if Cheryl Miller had the technology that we have now. Imagine, can you, like, sometimes I really get mad and I need to let this go, but I'm also not ready. Anyway, that's also a whole nother conversation, but I'm going to let you chime in first. Trade for Nika.
I mean, they need people that they're going to work on the bench, that they're going to use in the bench. Like, again, we were just talking about how, benches win games. And if you're going to have a bench that you're not utilizing, why keep them? Like, look at this. When you look at the box score of that game against the Aces, they did not use Semi. They didn't use Joyner Holmes. They didn't use Victoria Vivians, who had, they bring spark. Like, that's why you need the bench. Like, you have the energy, you have the spark. And if you're going to have a player to just sit there, you might as well bring someone they're going to use and, let the woman play. Like, I think so.
I hear what you're saying. I'm hard pressed though to believe that the reason that Nika Mule didn't get minutes is because she falls into the category of you're not showing up and not working hard. Like, I don't think that's ever been Nika's problem. It's
no.
The conversation that she was having with us in exit interviews. It's not what we've heard from other people.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I don't feel comfortable saying which players, but some of those players that you listed, it just seems like the writing's on the wall that they're a little bit checked out. And again, we're going to go player by player so we can get into that a little bit more. Yeah. But I think this goes to a conversation that you and I had before. And I said, I do think Noelle Quinn can be a coach of the year candidate someday, but she's not there. And this conversation about bench utilization, glaringly obvious when you compare even how Becky Hammond utilized her bench, someone that was forced. I still think Becky Hammond has to get better at that. She alluded to that also in the 23 finals. Sandy Brondello alluded to that after the 2023 season in exit interviews. But then you know what Sandy did? She used her bench. Yeah. She did what she said she needed to improve upon. And that's one of the things. Anyway, again, we can get into that. So I would say no for a trade with Nika Mule. You have her on a rookie contract. And I think you're right that if you're going to have a player, you have to utilize them. If you're not going to utilize them, then you need to get value in a way that's going to help you. But to me, that's not a Nika Mule issue. That is a coaching. The coaching staff has to commit to that. Now, that being said, it goes to something you said earlier, which is true. I don't think this is apropos to Nika Mule. But what you then need to do is, where is the disconnect between the front office and the GM versus the coaching staff? And maybe that's where the gap is. Because it didn't seem like there was confidence in Nika. I don't think Nika is a quote unquote problem player in the ways that Noelle Quinn was outlining. So and this is another thing. The bench didn't produce consistently. Let's be real. This team did not produce consistently. And so
Yeah.
again, that's where I go back to the comparison to the New York Liberty. Sandy Brondello wanted to use her bench more in 23, but she needed her starting five to build chemistry. And sometimes those are the lumps that you take.
Exactly. And I think in terms of consistency, honestly, the only person that you could count on consistency this year with the Storm was Neka. And towards the end, I don't know if she was tired because, like, honestly, she was carrying the team for a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
And in terms of consistency, Neka was like consistent from beginning to end. Skylar picked up on the second half, but she took some time to, really take control, be back to her usual basketball. Jordan, I know we're gonna go back to each player. I don't want to like start talking about each one individually, but there was no consistency, and it all seemed like a big experiment, to be very honest. And that's fair for a new roster. But also you can't win a championship when you're like experimenting.
I mean, it's not impossible. It's highly unlikely. It's highly unlikely. And there has to be a level of discipline, which again wasn't there with Seattle.
No.
This is a comment, not a question. Aloysius talked earlier when we were talking about salaries, CBA. Not trying to be messy, but Caitlin Clark, Asia Wilson, Sab make over 700, hello, add more zeros, 700K with endorsements. Absolutely, they do.
Yeah.
So does Angel Reese. So exactly. So does Angel Reese. So do a lot of players. But that's why, again, when we read the notes in the CBA, they differentiate in their notes between salary and bonuses. But also we've heard players like Kelsey Plum and other members, Brianna Stewart, talk about the difference between salary and endorsements. Endorsements are things that overwhelmingly come from the player and their independent team. I don't mean their WNB, like the Seattle Storms, New York Liberty. I mean like their PR team, their marketing team, their legal team, right? Their agents. That's what when I mean their team, that's what I mean in this particular scenario. And then again, we played that clip from Gabby Williams. Gabby Williams said that no one makes that price tag that the commissioner likes to tout. And Lindsay Gibbs talked about this in the documentary. Only if anyone makes that, only one player can do it, because it is all encompassing of Commissioner's Cup MVP, Finals
bonuses.
MVP, exactly, all of those things. Also, and again, we'll get into this, but man, Terry Jackson told the whole story of how they increased the bonuses for the skills competition, and I cannot wait to get into that.
Oh my God.
It was spicy. So we're going to talk about that. Okay, who is next after Bay Area and Portland? And then we also know Toronto already. Ooh, I've heard Utah. Utah is making a big pitch, to get all the sports. They just took the hockey team from Arizona. They are getting their, I believe, officially announced as what will be the Summer Olympics. It's going to be LA, Brisbane, and then I think Utah, And is it summer or winter? I don't know. Utah's trying to do big things. I wouldn't like to see it personally, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, so many people want to see Philly. I'm one of them.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I know.
I'm like, no.
I hear you. And I'm just telling you, as someone who covers multiple sports, and I happen to really enjoy learning about sports business, I was in Paris. I was sitting at tables having drinks with some heavy hitters. And I'm just telling you what the trend is. I'm not saying it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if and when it happens. Philly, I'd love to see a return to Charlotte. I feel some kind of way about a team returning to Houston. I'm okay with a team returning to Houston. I do not want them to be called the Comets. Do not call them the Comets. Don't call them the Comets. Don't do it. You're like setting yourself up. The Comets literally won 4 titles in a row. If you can't guarantee that you can do that, don't call yourself the Comets. Be somebody else.
Yeah.
Be
How would
somebody
you feel? How would you feel about a potential return of the Miami Hall?
I have strong feelings about Florida.
Same. That's something that I've been like,
Also,
okay,
as a
unrivaled. Why Miami?
Cuban, I have strong feelings about Miami. Miami Cubans, if you know, you know. I will not be on this platform. I will not be clarifying, or I will not say more. If you know, you know. That's all I got to say about that. Yeah. Anyway, if the season expanded, more games, longer playoffs, will we see more experiment? Okay, first of all, we don't have to ask if the season is expanding. And again, that's one of those things where we just did it because we can do it. And that's where the CBA or the opt-out, some of what the players want to do is like, okay, we know you have the right to do this, and we still think maybe this should be more of a conversation. The season is going to expand. It's gradually, it expanded this year. It's going to expand. Will we see more experimentation? Some rookies are getting burnt. Others are getting burned, getting play. Others are not. Again, I mean, this is so hard because, right, logically, you're like, okay, a longer season, that means you have to play more people because you don't want to burn out the people who you need to make a deep run, right? Except no, because of all the things I mentioned and ranted about earlier. Short training camp, quick turnaround from NCAA to draft to training camp to regular season. Don't let it be an Olympic year.
No.
Salary cap. Some teams will go less and will not fill out a 12-player roster because they want to cut salary so they can make a run to win a championship. Or they do that because they want the New York Liberty. They might go with 11, maybe even 10, because they want to get someone who has not returned from overseas yet. There's so many things. So, like, this is an interesting question, and I feel like I would need another hour and 26 minutes.
I agree.
To even get into this.
I agree.
I love it. And permission to put this in the parking lot, because we can do so much better than just giving you a quick answer right now. And we will.
Yeah.
And we will. There's that was a lot, and I have thoughts.
Oh, me too. I have thoughts, and okay, next, because there's so much that can be said about that.
Yes, biggest concern is expanding too fast. You get me, Moni. You get me though. Right? What are we doing? Okay, thank you, Ghosts. We got it. We're gonna handle it. Miami has a great Latina tennis fandom, by the way. They bring the energy. Brazilian, Chileans with soccer chants. I mean, the vibes are great. The vibes are great, culturally speaking, generally, broadly speaking. Again, I just happen to be Cuban and not from Miami. And so Cubans that are from other places, there's a thing. There's a thing. And again, I don't mess with Florida politics. That said, I live in Oklahoma. So what am I even talking about? Who knows?
Yeah, we were even seeing, oh my God, I love Ruth Riley.
A headband. Immediately, I thought headband and a pigtail. There was another
Where is Ruth Riley today?
Right? Because Ruth was doing some MNBA stuff for a little bit.
And she was doing some MNBA cares. She went to Africa. Yeah.
It might sound crazy. I trade Jewel Lloyd for whoever has the number 1 pick for Paige Beckers. Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Interesting. I mean, and I guess this goes back to a conversation, Roberta, you actually joined us on Gotta Get Up, but Jewel is a 2 guard. Jewel is a 2. But is Paige? I don't know. Now, I thought I knew the answer, and now I'm not so sure.
I think it all depends on this next season of the NCAA. I mean, she's a young player who can expand and change her position. I mean, to Brian's point, is basketball is like positionless basketball the future. And to Pokey Chatman's point also, she was like, if you're a good point guard, you have a guaranteed job. If you are a PG1 who can play the 2, don't worry, you're set for life.
Set for life. And I hear what you're saying, Moni, but I honestly think that what Roberta just said is probably more of Paige, because some people like try to mess around and play the two, but they really a point guard. Some people are a true two and they try to be a point guard, but it's not real. Paige might be both.
She can be, yeah.
She can be whatever she wants to be. She's like the Brianna Stewart of the backcourt.
Yep, I agree.
She's like a, I don't even, there's not even a number. She's a 1 3/4. I don't know. Like there's not a number.
Yep. And and I think that like, I think this next NCAA season is going to, because when you think of it, I'm a sucker because I think about these players' humanities and how young they are and how the game is changing so fast every year, every season. Like when you think of Stewie, if she was a player from 5 years ago, they would like get her at the 4 probably only, and she would get stuck, in a position. That's an issue with Brazilian basketball. For example, you get Camila. She's not good still at the long range shot because she has always been like stuck at the 5. So you have to be flexible to be a pro. Oh my God, I was gonna mention Juju.
I'm weak. Not free Starbucks and Microsoft Office.
That's very funny.
That's so funny. Like, we will give you the full suite. Don't worry about it. That's hilarious.
That's hilarious.
Listen, but I agree saying let's watch Paige. I think the same goes for Fudd, and Watkins has a lot of maturity still left to learn, which is wild because I genuinely, because people, I don't want people to clip that. Don't be clipping that without hearing what I gotta say next. She does have a lot to learn from a maturity standpoint, and sis already got a lot more maturity than some people we seen in the WNBA.
Oh yeah,
you can tell when I said that. But the fact that she's so young and she's still learning, like that's wild to me. That is dangerous. That is scary. Like scary, and I can't wait. Like it's like I hate scary movies, but I really don't. Give it to me right now.
Yeah. I think that those younger players, they're going to evolve in such different ways. And I feel that like from this last class, the player that we saw like evolving the most and like adapting her game, in my opinion, was Angel Reese, because I feel like she has expanded her like shooting arsenal from different spots on the court. So I feel like she's the player who took better advantage of the positionless basketball in the WNBA.
She's so cerebral, and she doesn't get enough credit. She doesn't get enough credit for being cerebral. I had the honor of covering the Albany Regional, and if you really listen to Angel Reese answer questions, I'll just give one example. She was asked a question about Hannah Stuelke ahead of the matchup against Iowa, and the way she was responding, you can only respond that way if you like know Hannah's game. And not just her game this year, but like she knows Hannah's game. And she was like, she's gotten better at this. And I'm so proud that she's doing that. Like, and she was complimentary, because some people don't mess with that. They're like, oh, I'm fitting to play them tomorrow, and you want to ask me about them? Next question. Angel Reese had all the time. She was complimentary. She was like, this is where she creates problems. This is what we'll have to do. I love that she's grown this part of her game. And again, she was talking about Hannah Stuelke, but you can't answer a question that in depth without being cerebral. Like, oh, if she's a coach one day, I wouldn't be surprised.
Without studying the game.
If she's not a coach, I also wouldn't be surprised, because whatever she wants, like, because she has a persona that just it's beyond, it's so beyond. But also she's smart. Her IQ, her love, her passion, and the way she absorbs basketball is like Oh my gosh. I want to see more of it.
Yeah, if I can tie that back to the Storm, she said something that, again, talking about being cerebral. Someone posted something about Skylar Diggins Smith, and then she responded, quote tweeted, and said, "Thank you, Queen. I learned that as a player, I can be like a good player, do fashion, and market myself with you." People take the 2013 class for granted when it comes to marketing. Skylar Diggins Smith was the first Jordan Brand player, and I think she was the most followed player, the most followed NCAA player in 2013 when she was drafted. I mean, I know that we don't like him today, but at the time he was okay. Drake shouted her out, so it was annoying and it was terrible. But like, she would go to all these popular shows that we see players going today. That didn't happen. 2013, we were like, women's basketball fans were like, feeding off crumbs. And Skylar Diggins Smith, she was one of those first players to know how to market herself
That's
and
true.
take the opportunity of the market. Super smart. And the fact that she shouted that out, I mean, she was what year was Angel Reese born? Like, I don't know, but she like, that was
2000
2013.
something, right?
Yeah, the fact that she's fully aware of what was happening. When she was a child, she has studied this game. She has
Yep.
studied this league, and people take her for granted.
Totally.
I feel like, yeah, it really, I feel like it really sucks to be, what people do with her, because
I know.
she's
I
one of
know.
the smartest
So smart.
players
Like,
out there.
that's why I like Moni's comment here. Skylar's rookie year is very
Yeah.
Angels as far as off the court. Yeah, Angel's mom was a baller. She's educated. Clearly, like, she knows what she's talking about. Listen, Roberta, we got into a lot here. This is
Yeah.
why I love the off season, because we can like really get
Yeah.
into things. And so again, the plan as of right now, unless, I mean, if the people say they want more, we will take it into consideration. But the plan for right now is to go every other week. So this is the Tempestagi Talk week. Next week, you can join us. We will also be going live on YouTube on Thursday, but we will be focused on the New York Liberty from the New York Liberty perspective. On Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. We're going to have Brian Florentin, and then Gigi Spear is also going to join us. So that's going to be fun. And again, we are going to have conversations. We're going to do deeper dives. We've got expansion draft, CBA, lottery draft. We have so much to talk about, and I freaking love it. Unrivaled. I talked about it at the top of the show. Unrivaled, Athletes Unlimited. Is there going to be beef between Unrivaled and Athletes Unlimited? Who knows? But we will be here with you. So thank you so much for joining us here on Black Rosie Media for our podcast, Tempestagi Talk. Tempestagi, of course. I don't want to say, of course. We want to bring people into the conversation, pull y'all in. Tempestagi. Am I saying that right? I want to make sure.
Yeah.
Let's get the Portuguese speaker here. But tempestagi is what in Portuguese?
Storm.
That's it.
Because the D, when it's in the middle of a sentence, it sounds like the phone name. Yeah, so Tempestade. So someone said, I just thought it was funny talking about Unrivaled when they announced the roster expansion. Someone was like, well, that sounds like someone just turned down a $1 million deal and they have all the money left.
Oh, burn. Yeah, we're going to get into that. I alluded to it at the top of the episode, but I have a lot of thoughts. Yeah. Aloysius, we're not doing the Ellie wave. You got to wait till next week. Next week, we'll do the Ellie wave. Although Ellie was very popular. Today's Halloween, but Ellie was very popular, including, did y'all see Sarah Spain put in do the splits? I was like,
oh my God, I did.
I know
My
that's
herb-
right. I know that's right. She said, don't you forget it. I love that. But okay,
Yeah.
for Roberta Rodriguez, my name is Erica L. Ayala, and this is and has been Tempestagi Talk. In another, so 2 weeks we will be back. But again, you can join us for Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. We will be going on, I believe, at 7:30 Eastern time, but check Black Rosie Media on YouTube. And again, you can join our Slack community, and that's where you get all the goods. But Roberta, we had a good time. Look, almost 2 hours in here, and we didn't even get all of it. But we had to talk about the tea because there's a lot going on in Seattle. We don't have an Ellie wave because Ellie is for Gotta Get Up and New York Liberty, but we'll have to figure out a way how we will close these shows. But for now, we'll just awkwardly wave, not Ellie wave, but just awkwardly wave. Have a great night. Thank you so much for tapping in. We'll see you again soon. Juju, go to the storm. Good night, everybody.